morning, everyone. Welcome. Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing with me number 163 in the gray hymnal, For the Earth Forever Turning. Number 163. For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heaven, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our blue-green hills of earth. You may be seated.
Good morning. I am Gurkirat Sekhon, a lay worship leader and Sikh Unitarian Universalist. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, a presence in this community since 1865. I wish to extend a warm welcome to those joining us online. If you'd like to take a second and introduce yourself in the chat, please do. I know other members of our community will warmly greet you there. In addition, we invite you to please take a moment and fill out our newcomer survey at uuaa.org/newcomer survey, which will help us better connect with you. I'm hearing like reverb, I'm not sure what that is. If you are attending for the first time and are with us in person, we invite you to attend our newcomer welcome. The newcomer welcome takes place each week after our service in the Redmond room, which is out these doors, the first room on the left. You will know you've made it if you see a sign that reads Redmond Room. Someone will be there to help answer questions about this congregation and Unitarian Universalism more broadly. We have a few brief announcements for you this Sunday. As a reminder, next week marks the beginning of our summer services as we move to just one weekly Sunday service at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, in person and online. In 2 weeks, on Sunday, June 2nd, we'll be holding a congregational meeting over Zoom. We will gather at 10:30, online only. There will be no in-person gathering that Sunday, so don't come here. We'll begin with a 30-minute recorded worship service that leads directly into the congregational meeting. All are welcome to attend our congregational meetings. The only members of the congregation may vote on any matters requiring a vote. You can find the Zoom link on the UUAA website or in the weekly news. Speaking of news, have you heard that there are superheroes in our midst? You might have seen these brave and mysterious costumed volunteers these past few weeks. Whether they drew your intrigue or you shyly avoided contact for fear of losing your cool, our local Unitarian Universalist heroes invite you to join their cause. On Saturday, June 1st, they will be holding a superhero-themed auction from 4 to 7 p.m. Be sure to purchase tickets at the auction table during the social hour, and mark your calendars, it's sure to be great fun. Last year at our annual auction, our very own Vilma Mesa won the auction item Reverend Manish offered, the superpower to decide a topic that Reverend Manish would preach about. We can thank Vilma for inspiring today's Sunday service theme, aptly titled, The End of the World as We Know It. That's a song, isn't it? As we enter more deeply into our worship hour, let's prime ourselves to consider both the grief and the hope that such a framing might offer. The end of the world challenges us to encounter all kinds of loss, losses of the worst order if we're thinking about climate change and environmental disaster, the ongoing genocide abroad, and the more local prison industrial complex, among other larger scale injustices. But it's that last part of the title, The World as We Know It, that lends itself to something more hopeful. If we might challenge the ways we have ever known the world, shedding the injustices of how and what we've previously known, and inviting the care of knowing otherwise, of knowing on behalf of a world to come. We are gathered in worship, we are gathered in community.
I love dystopian fiction. Hot take, I know. Give me a book about a bleak alternate reality or future, and I will devour it. The perils of new technology, pandemics, nuclear war, etc. Maybe it's a way to make our frightening world seem a little less frightening. I just finished a book called The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker, about a sleeping sickness that takes over a small town in California. At one point, a man stricken with the sickness is sleepwalking down a street. Walker writes, "A few people have collected on their porches now, watching, but they stay where they are. The unkindness of fear. The unkindness of fear." That particular phrasing reminded me of the words that we use to light our chalice every Sunday. The light of truth, the warmth of love, the energy of action, the harmony of peace, the unkindness of fear. This is why our gathering here together is so important. Lighting the chalice reminds us to remain steadfastly kind and compassionate in the face of an increasingly fearful, distrustful world. It is a symbol of resilience and love, a lodestar that guides us to hold deeply to our collective vision of a just and peaceful future for all people. This morning, I'd like to invite Vilma Mesa to the chancel to help us light our chalice. If you're watching from another location and you have a chalice nearby, I invite you to light it now. And if you wish, share in the chat that your chalice is lit, perhaps with your location, so that we may all rejoice in the power and strength of the flickering flame. Together, let us say, we light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Thank you, Vilma. Just as we light a chalice every Sunday, so too do we recite the words of our community's covenant. We are not a faith tradition that subscribes to one particular set of beliefs. We are all on our own spiritual journeys. We are instead a covenantal faith, a faith that calls us to treat one another with kindness, to live out our shared values, to keep our hearts and minds open. So whether you are joining us for the first time or whether you have these words memorized, please join me as we say together, the spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth and love, and to help one another. We live in a time of deep and complex uncertainty. We journey together with our children, one day after another, through a world awash in challenges, the potential for danger lurking around every corner. We wonder what tomorrow will bring, and it's in the not knowing, the wondering, that worries and fears take root and grow, and still we go on. We wake up every morning, we breathe in and out, and we prepare to face a world that can be scary, especially for our kids. Their small shoulders bearing the heavy weight of climate change, oppression, violence, and injustice. We yearn to shield them from it all, to keep them safe and protected in a warm cocoon of love and reassurance. But we know in our hearts that we cannot and must not pretend that our world is different than it is. And so we ask ourselves, how do we guide our children through the messiness and doubt of the times we live in? How do we teach them that it's okay to be afraid, that it's normal to worry, and that learning to live with uncertainty is deeply human? How do we explain that, as Robert Frost writes, the best way out is through? Perhaps we can find inspiration in our story for all ages. Whatever Comes Tomorrow. Words by Rebecca Gardyn Levington. Art by Mariona Cabasa. Tomorrow may bring endless sun or swirly, snowy skies. Tomorrow may bring new hellos or difficult goodbyes. Tomorrow may bring loneliness or laughter with a friend. Tomorrow may bring words that wound or ones that heal and mend. Tomorrow may bring changes that are scary, strange, or new. Tomorrow may bring chances to embrace your truest you. Tomorrow may bring obstacles that seem too hard to face. Tomorrow may bring feelings that will need some extra space. Tomorrow may bring questions that you have no answers for, or answers that may lead you to more questions than before. Tomorrow may bring anything. You have no way to know, and sometimes that uncertainty gives worries room to grow. They sprout and bloom, consume your mind. You want to run and hide. But you've confronted fear before and reached the other side. You can't control what happens next, the what, the where, the how. The only thing in your control is you, right here, right now. You take a breath, you close your eyes, you whisper, I am strong. You tell those worries in your head, I know I can, you're wrong. And when tomorrow disappears, becoming yesterday, you'll know for sure you can endure whatever comes your way. Tomorrow may bring laughter, love, confusion, fear, or fun. An angry, rainy hurricane, or peaceful seaside sun. Whatever comes tomorrow, however steep the hill, you'll find your path, you'll journey on, you'll make it through. You will. The end. Hope is a choice. Hope is a commitment we make. As Dr. Cornel West writes, hope is inseparable from despair. Those of us who truly hope make despair a constant companion whom we out-wrestle every day, owing to our commitment to justice, love, and hope. We go on because we must. We forge ahead for our children and their children, for our ancestors, and for future generations. We lean into the fear. We sit with it. We ask it questions. We thank it for what it teaches us about resilience and courage. We teach our children to take a breath, close their eyes, and whisper, "I am strong." We love them unconditionally. We continue on our journey because to give in to despair would dishonor those that came before us, who faced down generational challenges and made our world a better place in the face of fierce headwinds and resistance. Let us commit over and over again to doing the good work, to raising children steeped in righteousness and faith, to centering love and not fear. May it be so. As we move deeper into our time of worship, let us sing those young people, wherever they may be, love and affection as we sing out the time for all ages.
Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine.
Among the things I appreciate most about our congregation is our investment in action. We live out our values through our diverse and far-reaching social justice commitments. To fully appreciate the reach and range of our efforts, we set aside time for social justice connections, when groups are invited to the chancel to tell us about their work. Today we'll learn about a particularly impactful local initiative, Restorative Justice at UUAA. As Unitarian Universalists, our commitments to social justice and critical reflection help us recognize the complexity of harm, the injustices of the prison industrial complex, or at the most basic level, the human capacity to make mistakes. Kathy Friedrichs and Tracy Darrow are here to tell us more about the work of their restorative justice efforts and its transformative impact. Please welcome them warmly.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Friedrichs, co-chair of Restorative Justice at UUAA. Our group works for change in the arena of criminal justice broadly defined. We practice restorative justice, educate about the failures of the current justice system. We facilitate congregants' communication with incarcerated people, provide multiple forms of reentry support, advocate for policy change, and volunteer inside the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti. Today, I want to talk about our work conducting restorative justice circles inside Huron Valley. This picture is a collage of women incarcerated there. Most are part of the National Lifers Association, people with long or life sentences who work for positive change in themselves, in prison, and in justice policy. Restorative justice circles are deeply rooted in indigenous cultures. Their goal is to address harm and wrongdoing. Currently, more than 50 women are participating in these circles. And what has impressed me most about these women is their courage to face the harm they caused, their desire to make things right, and to recognize the good people they know they are. Say inside, excuse me. It's not an easy journey. I watch these women pass the talking piece, dig deep in their experience to find growth, and express compassion for one another. It's a privilege to sit in circle with them.
Sorry. We have many opportunities if you would like to get involved with restorative justice, and Tracy's going to tell you about some of them.
Hard to follow that. I actually have a participatory part of the speech. We're going to take a little quiz. We hopefully have some slides. Okay, so true, false questions. If you think it's true, give me a thumbs up. If you think it's false, give me a thumbs down. Here's the first one. Michigan has the longest average prison sentence of any state in the country. Wow, you guys we got a mixed bunch. The answer is actually, next slide, there you go, true. The average prison sentence in Michigan is currently at 11 years, for the average. All right, next question. 90% of the women with a life sentence in the US are serving for retaliating against a domestic abusive partner. Okay, that one you guys know. Yep, 100, good job. That's true, unfortunately, as well. Next question. Michigan spends approximately $2.3 billion annually keeping people in prison, and the average cost to house a person in prison is $46,000. Yeah, we wish it wasn't true, but it is true. And then the cost actually goes up to about $70,000 as they age and they need more medical assistance. Next question. We're almost to the end. You guys are doing great. Research has shown that people age out of crime. You guys are good. So this one's actually true. A majority of violent crime is committed by people in their teens and 20s. And I think now that we're doing more brain development research, we realize how the brain actually takes a while longer to develop than what we originally thought. So that is, people do age out of crime. By the time you're 30, 40, 50, you decide you don't want to do that kind of stuff you did when you were a kid anymore, thank goodness. Okay, last question. And this one, this is what caused all the slides, because there's some numbers in this one. Of the approximately 33,000 people in Michigan prisons right now, 2,500 of them are 55 or older, and 20 of them are over 80 years old. What do you think? True? Unfortunately, this one's false. We have over 5,600 people that are 55 and older, and 88 people that are over 80 years old that are serving largely life sentences. So, in our restorative justice group, not only are we lucky enough to get to know and grow with the women on the inside, we get to help work to improve the criminal injustice system that's contributed to the mass incarceration problem here in Michigan. One way that we're trying to do this that can have a long-term impact is through changing our laws. In March, the Second Look legislation bill package was heard by the Michigan House Criminal Justice Committee. This bill considers the humanity of those serving time and allows the judge or the original jurisdiction that originally heard their case to reconsider the length of the person's sentence, given the trajectory of the incarcerated person's life, what led up to the crime, the circumstances of the crime, and their rehabilitation process while incarcerated, like what Kathy was talking about. Normally, in these cases, a lot of times people have taken plea bargains, so none of this information is available for the judge to consider. And in Michigan, we have laws that specifically assign terms of sentence to crimes that were committed, despite the circumstances. This legislation would recognize that those that have taken accountability for their actions, shown extreme remorse, and have a deep desire to contribute to society in a positive way because they have a lot to offer. We're taught that our democratic society is built on the principle of with liberty and justice for all, but we all know that justice is not truly served until it's humanely served to us all. It's often said the biggest thing that keeps people going on the inside is hope, like what Stella had mentioned. Please help us help them. Give them hope by stopping by our table at the social Hall after the service today and sign a letter to support our state legislators in approving the Second Look legislation. Kathy and I and our group will be there to answer questions and talk about other opportunities that we have to help. We welcome new members at any time, and after all, it's part of our UU DNA, believing in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy and Tracy, for your insight and for the continuing hard work you and the rest of the committee undertake to support these folks. Initiatives like restorative justice at UUAA speak not only to the reach of our community's engagement locally, but also to a longer history of our commitment to the spiritual practice of giving. Our weekly offering today will go to the programs and ministries of this congregation. This week, I invite you to reflect on the ways you might commit to the transformative energies represented in our community's restorative justice work. Your financial generosity directly supports our ability to nurture this kind of transformation and hope in the wider world. There are a number of ways you can participate in today's offering. For digital options, you may text UUAA to 73256 or visit uuaa.org/giving and select weekly offering for the fund. Or you may drop cash or checks into the baskets that the ushers will help circulate in this sanctuary. Thank you in advance for your generosity. I invite the ushers to now please come forward as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. Allison is just so good at that. As our ushers bring forth today's offerings, I invite you to please rise in body or in spirit as you are comfortably able, and let us speak with intention as we say together our words of dedication. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. You may be seated.
Good morning. As we move deeper into our time of reflection this morning, I want to invite us into a time of meditative singing. If you take out your gray hymnals, it's hymn 112. Do you hear? I'm going to invite you to remain seated as we sing this hymn together. And just hold a little bit in your awareness the way in which the times we are living in constantly hook our attention around something or another that feels really urgent, really pressing, really important. What are we listening to? How do we listen expansively, even as we hear something concrete, something very specific that is important? How do we also zoom out to notice the overall context, the larger picture of what we're a part of? Let us join together in singing, "Do You Hear?" I want to start out with a heartfelt thank you to Vilma Mesa. Thank you for being our auction winner last year, choosing today's service topic. Shortly after last year's auction, I received a package in the mail. That package contained this tome, along with, I got a message, "Looking forward to working with you on the auction sermon. Love, Vilma." She is an academic. I'm not surprised necessarily, but I also didn't expect it. Now, what I just showed you, it is a book by Professor Thomas Piketty by the name of Capital and Ideology. Professor Piketty has served as assistant professor of economics at MIT, previously chaired the Paris School of Economics, and currently is a professor at the London School of Economics. This tome was published in 2019 in French. This is the translated version that was published a year later in 2020. The translator is a professor by the name of Arthur Goldhammer, whose PhD is in mathematics, not linguistics, not English, not French, but math. It shows. This book has 1,041 pages, and you have to get to page 1041 to discover that at the end, there's a glossary that explains some of the language in the book, and an additional, more detailed table of contents than the very brief one-pager at the beginning of the book. It is a magnum opus. I had to read it twice. And in all honesty, I didn't really like it I didn't tell Vilma this. I didn't really like it that much the first time around. my economics is part of my training. That's what I did, and I worked in the field for a while. So I understand the languaging and the concepting, but it's abstruse and complex and highly academic. I had to read it. I read it a second time more recently in preparation for today. That second time went a little smoother. But let me share with you this is a sample, just a couple sentences from the introduction, not even like page 500 or anything like this. This is the beginning, the context setting. Quote, the current inequality regime, which I call neo-proprietarian, bears traces of all the economic political regimes that preceded it. To study it properly, we must begin by examining how the tri-functional societies of the pre-modern era, which were based on ternary structure, evolved into the ownership societies of the 18th and 19th centuries. Did anybody understand that? I may never offer an auction sermon again. Thank you, Vilma. I'm totally joking. But if in the future I do, could you pick a movie or maybe a favorite poem? Or if it has to be academic, articles are fine. Or really anything that's significantly less than 1,000 pages would also be fine. It's totally okay. As I mentioned, I'm a trained economist. I'm a member of the National Economics Society, yada, yada, yada. If I'm not able to make heads or tails of this, then there's no hope. Nobody can, right? So I want to share a little bit about this. So Professor Piketty's major focus in this book, Capital and Ideology, he's focusing on inequality, which we know has been a major societal problem, both in the United States, but actually globally, so not just in the United States. The book is, in fact, global in its focus. It really is a magnum opus. I'm not exaggerating. The number of topics and the international global perspective that it brings in tremendous depth, I can't understate it. So I've had to, for the purposes of a very brief sermon, which is all I can do with you today, I've had to make fairly severe editing choices, and I've chosen to focus on our context, which is also a significant focus in the book, the U.S. context and the U.S. story. So to understand our story, the U.S. story around inequality, we have to know that prior to Ronald Reagan's presidency, for a period of about 50 years, roughly 1932 to 1980, the U.S. had one of the highest marginal income tax rates on planet Earth. Now, what is a marginal income tax rate? That means that the tax rate increases as your income increases. Now, what that looked like up until about 1980 was that for the highest earners, your tax rate was approximately 81%. Now, you could compare that to other countries that are similar to us. In the United Kingdom, it was 89%. So high, but not necessarily something the world has never seen before. And it was part of what's known as a progressive tax rate system. As I explained, the tax rate gets higher as your income gets higher. Piketty notes that, this was not the death of capitalism by any means. That period of 1930 to 1980 saw tremendous growth and innovation and creativity in U.S. culture. Our economy excelled in that time period. So the progressive tax system was working. It was not fundamentally problematic. But you can imagine that those who were the highest income earners were probably not happy about being taxed at a rate of 81%. So Reagan gets elected president with the promise to change all of this, to reform this, and he does. Now, before I get to what he did and the impacts of it, what was all this money that was raised through progressive taxes used for? It was used to fund the New Deal commitments. So all the social safety nets, a lot of the public works that happened, a lot of good things that we can talk about as communal care, collective care for our society, occurred by virtue of this progressive tax system that we had. Reagan comes into office, initiates massive tax cuts for the wealthy, and that tax rate, which I mentioned for the highest earners, was at 81%. What do you think it gets reduced to? Yeah, not bad. That's a very good guess. I heard 35 out there. It hovers between 30 and 40%. So it's in half. On the wealthiest earners in the United States, Ronald Reagan gave them a 50% cut in their taxes. Other people, ordinary working class people, did not get a 50% cut in their taxes. So what is the practical impact of the wealthiest in our society getting a 50% tax cut that nobody else got? So up until 1980, or thereabouts, about half of our society, the bottom half, was earning 20% of national income. Pause and just digest what I've said for a moment. You should be appalled by the statistic I've just given you. What that means is the upper 50% was living off of 80% of the income earned in the United States. The upper 50% was living off of 80% of the income. The bottom 50 was living off 20%. Take just a moment and imagine where you would fit in that. Would you have fit into the top 50% or the lower 50%? With Ronald Reagan's tax cuts, that income disparity, already appalling in 1980, becomes exponentially worse. By 2018, so just 6 years ago, the bottom half of US society was living off of 12% of national income. 12%. That means that the upper 50% is living off of 88%. The vast majority of income being earned in the United States is only going to half the population. We should not be surprised about the political and civic fissures in our nation. All you need to look at is this one statistic that I've given you, that half the population is living off of 12% of the money being earned in our nation. Now, there's a multitude of factors that contribute to this. Huge, real inflation-adjusted, meaning inflation-adjusted, declines in the federal minimum wage. It stayed static for a bunch of years, and the increases did not keep up with the pace of inflation. So in essence, people earning the lowest wages lost a lot of ground because the minimum wage was not being adjusted upward appropriately. Second factor he points out is inequality of access to education, quality education. Huge issue in our society, not a small one. And as the wealthiest people held on to more money, income disparities and inequality increased. Now, there's an interesting plot point in all of this, because I know folks who identify as politically progressive or liberal, we want to believe that we're on the right side of these kinds of debates. Piketty, who is not a US citizen, has no interest in really trying to defend either major political ideology in the US, and in taking that more like step back, dispassionate approach, points out, for those who are inclined to want to believe that political liberals or political progressives somehow do better on these questions, neither Clinton nor Obama, and they had plenty of chance, both presidents had plenty of opportunity to make a difference on these questions. Neither of them even attempted to unroll the Reagan-era tax cuts on the wealthy. Piketty points out that this is a significant, I'm calling it plot point, but it's a significant factor in what's going on in the United States today. And while the very socioeconomic structure of US society was fundamentally changing from 1980 onwards, it was also fundamentally changing at a political level. Now, for those who identify as politically progressive or liberal, think for a moment of how that side of our political spectrum has really identified and understood itself for a long historical period of time. You could say like 1940s, 50s, through about 1980. Left-wing politics, by the way, this is not just US. Piketty does an extensive analysis of what I'm about to get into next, specifically about US politics, but it's a global phenomenon, particularly in the West. It's not limited to the United States. Left-wing politics, the left side of the spectrum, was highly worker-oriented. So that means the people with the least amount of education, that were earning the least income in society, deeply identified with the left end of the political spectrum, where it was believed that that is the end of the spectrum. Those are the politicians who are going to improve our lot and work for the good of all. Right-wing politics, for that same time period, 1940s, 50s, till about 1980, was dominated by the needs of those who already have access to significant resources. This fundamentally changes, 1980 onward. What begins to change is that those individuals, well, there's a few things that change. So think first about that left-wing ideology. That left-wing ideology also held, all right? So there are people that are earning less, that have had less education, et cetera, less access to resources and income. The left believed that universal access to quality education was the way to lift everyone up. And it was deeply emphasized in that time period, 1940s, 50s through 1980. Guess what? It worked for some, not all. It worked for some. As it began to work for some, those who were able to get access to quality education, i.e., named credentials that others recognize as holding value, those particular individuals were able to earn more money. As those highly educated folk were able to earn more money, guess what? Political priorities shifted for those folks. Those highly educated, highly successful folks began to become more concerned with wealth maintenance, i.e., the left traditional ideology of how are we lifting everyone up began to slip with the politics of how are we supporting the wealth that has been accumulated and maintained by those who have been able to access quality education. Over time, in the decades subsequent to 1980, this was noticed by those with less education and those that were earning less income. They began to notice that those who were able to access big name, high quality credentials and education were leaving them behind, no longer concerned about the welfare of all, lifting up those that had not had access to that kind of education, and Piketty notes, began to display disdain for those that were unable to keep up. Intellectual elitism. The left fully transitions, Piketty says, from a party concerned for the welfare of all, most especially the ordinary working person, to a party of intellectual elites. Keep in mind everything that's in the news for the past month, the attack on academic institutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It starts to make sense in light of this analysis. The left in the US, but not only the US, becomes a party of educated elites. The right has its own shift, a little less dramatic, but a shift nonetheless. Those who have had access to generational wealth, they stay on the right, but those who are working class folks, they shift. They move from the left, they give up on the left. They totally give up on the left. They had been with the left for decades and decades, and then they watch the intellectual elites starting to make fun of them. They totally give up and shift over to the right. This becomes a new base on the right, which is a working class, Piketty calls it mercantile, but you can think of it as an entrepreneurial, small business, tradesman class of folk that form an alliance or a coalition with those that are extremely wealthy. It almost defies logic, but that's the lot that they place themselves in. With where the logic kicks in is hard work, hard entrepreneurial ethic might mean that I too could become a millionaire, billionaire through hard work. And that identification allows that coalition to kind of exist. Now, what's interesting about this is that both of these new political movements, what becomes the new left and then the new right, they each have a center. The left center and the right center actually have the same objectives and goals, which is wealth preservation. These are the people who have made it. They're in the top 50% that currently have 80% of our national income. They're concerned with wealth preservation, which is another way of saying inequality preservation. The folks who are concerned with wealth preservation, you can't hold both of those ethoses equally. One is going to matter more. Are you more concerned with your self-preservation of what you got, or are you more concerned with redistribution? One is going to outweigh the other. And the center of both the left and the right are focused on wealth preservation for those who have it. Now here's the crux of the book. Piketty notes that every society has to decide how much inequality exists in their nation or their state, and why. What is the rationale, what is the justification for the inequality that exists? Currently, in our context, for the left, the rationale is you have to educate yourself to get ahead. If you didn't apply yourself or somehow couldn't access quality education or educational resources, you will get left behind. So worthiness on the left is determined by educational credentialing and educational achievement or creativity, which then translates into income, which it becomes to believed, internalized as I deserve this. This is what I deserve. On the right, the logic is that either your ancestors already had access to wealth because they worked hard and hustled, your ancestors, and then they passed that on to you, the fruit of their hard work and labor, or you hustled. You formed that small business, you worked as a tradesman, working 7 days a week at odd hours, whatever hours were necessary. You hustled and found your way in the world and made it. And you deserve to hold on to what you've got. If you've been left behind, you've been left behind in either of these rationales or logics. Now, when Vilma and I first met about this topic, we had a very heartfelt conversation. This was last fall before my sabbatical. And Vilma said, in a very deep way, I really appreciate it. What does this all mean? What does Piketty's thesis mean for us all? If we've been living this way, and is there hope for our society? Beautiful questions, which I really appreciated. I hold those questions as well. Piketty notes that the tensions around inequality have to get resolved somehow. And he's doing, now this is historical analysis. He's not the only one that's done this historical analysis. Others have too. The tensions around inequality must get resolved. By the way, our society has not been resolving it. Those two centers, center left, center right, are pretty content with holding on to 80% of the nation's income. We have not been addressing these inequality questions. So what may happen? What Piketty notes, and you could tell it's almost reluctantly because he overemphasizes a lot of points in this book, and this is the one he comes back to again and again, gently skirts, touches, and then goes on to talk about other things. He doesn't like this option as my analysis or my take. Nations and states that are unable to resolve inequality often, and historically this is absolutely true, this is historically what happens. Violence emerges, and that society or state, the structures of it, are overthrown. This is historically what has always happened when equality reaches extreme levels. Now, many of us have been sitting with this at the level of culture. We don't talk about it explicitly, but we need to start to be okay with naming this. Many of us have wondered how much longer U.S. society can endure with its current tensions. It's a good question that you should be present to. And in a certain way, is it really any surprise? Even if we didn't have the statistic that I just gave you today, intuitively, on some level, many of us have known how bad things were. How long did we think that half of our society would perfectly just go along with earning 12% of the national income? Not doing anything about it is not the same as actually addressing it and working on it and fundamentally changing that reality. The bottom 50% weren't just going to quietly go along with this forever. So the collapse of our political and/or economic system is one very real possibility. One of my spiritual teachers, mentors, Meg Wheatley, her research is specifically on this. She looks at this in tremendous detail and says that basically U.S. society is following almost to the letter the historical pattern that has occurred, and the biggest marker before the fall of a civilization or a society historically is the extreme inequality that presages. It is a clear predictor of what will emerge next. Okay, hold that. That's one very real possibility. The next is, and then Piketty holds this up, you could imagine a political coalition emerging of the center left and the center right. Their interests are actually aligned, even though they don't acknowledge it. That common interest is the status quo. Let's hold on to the 80% of national income for as long as we can. But if somehow, now this is more likely to happen, that type of coalition of center left and center right, in a parliamentary democracy. We are not that. And you have to also factor in the United States, the level of vitriol, the level of disdain that the left holds for the right and the right holds for the left. That type of center-left, center-right coalition building in the United States, theoretically it's possible. I think Piketty holds that as the most plausible resolution in the United States without overthrow, without a violent revolution of some kind. And yet it seems unlikely that those who currently identify themselves on the political left and the political right are somehow going to become partners in governance. The wells may be too poisoned for that. The third possibility that Piketty holds forward. Now, this is, when I first read the book last fall, I said to Vilma, his solution, this is the third solution he offers, or possibility, it's way too pie in the sky, it's naive. It would never happen. So Piketty offers, and I got this in my second closer read, he offers this kind of pie in the sky solution. He calls it participatory socialism. It is not any kind of socialism that has already existed on planet Earth. When he says participatory, he means participatory. He means global participation in some kind of transnational democracy that is highly participatory, in which there again is global transparency about how the financial system is being set up and what the costs of that financial system, that financial way of life are, that places a premium on fiscal cooperation with others, that has a universal basic income, that focuses on educational justice, meaning access to high-quality education for all, and that has concepts and structures of pooled capital, shared capital, meaning that private capital is no longer the primary emphasis of economic organization. that rather some level of shared or temporary ownership or shared capital emerges. Now, my first read on this was like, yeah, that's going to happen. On what planet? And my second read, when I read all this a second time, I thought, wait, this is kind of exciting. Thank you, Vilma. And this is where I'm going to bring in some of my personal interest. This is the Star Trek universe. We have had this vision for a while already. Gene Roddenberry gave it to us. There is no money in the Star Trek universe. Nobody is starving. Nobody is living homeless. Basic needs are met. There's no salary that somebody's doing work for. You're pursuing work because it's your passion, the thing you're good at. We've actually envisioned what this could look like. I kind of have always wanted that universe. I've wanted it since I first encountered Star Trek in the 1970s. I knew that something was good and something was really right about that vision. And this is Piketty's vision of what we, humanity, needs. Now here I want to pivot to spirituality and community and religion and ethics, our business, our work. It is one of aspiration. I don't know, and Piketty acknowledges, I think maybe too humbly, because it is possible to predict trajectories and see the writing on the wall to a degree. But Piketty says, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in the future. I think we can predict likely scenarios, most of us today. But he claims, and this was pre-pandemic when he was writing, that anything is still possible. Regardless of whether anything is still possible or there are some highly likely scenarios that we are on the trajectory of, we as a people must hold in our hearts the vision of what would have been better and what still can be better. Whether it is a worst-case scenario, civilizations before us and societies before us, their governance and systems of rule and law have fallen apart and been reconstituted. If that happens in our society, we would not be the first to whom that has happened. We can and should hold at the center what we know would be better. And what we do know is the current economic and political system that we are a part of, which has become globalized, is highly exploitative, unfair, and even cruel. We as a species could have and should have done better. We knew better. Now here's the beautiful thing about us. None of that happens. That grander vision doesn't happen unless you start practicing it and living into it locally, at the level of community. These are always build-up movements. They don't just magically appear at larger scale. We get to practice with one another locally. In this community, yes, maybe locally in Washtenaw County, maybe locally in Michigan, maybe locally in the Great Lakes region. We get to practice exactly what you heard today. So moving, thank you for sharing. That was one of the best social justice connections I've been present to. You did a beautiful job. But reimagining the entire system of justice, yes, it needs to be completely reimagined. And we are people that are doing that. The same is true for our economic and political structures. They don't currently work. And we are the people who are actively reimagining that. That is what the word faith means. I know a lot of you struggle with that word. Use it perhaps the way I do. For me, it means trust. What are you willing to put your trust in? I'm willing to put my trust in that vision of what we know can be a better, thriving humanity. I invite you into it with me. It is our collective work.
Please rise rise in body or in spirit and turn to, in the teal hymnal, to number 1015, I Know I Can. While the text of this hymn reflects the binary language of its time, we at UUAA draw our circle wide to include all our siblings of any gender, not just brothers and sisters. Please join in singing number 1015, I Know I Can.
Troubles wait at every turn. I know I can go on. When sorrow heals my soul and burdens make me strong, though troubles wait on every turn, I know I can go on. My sister in my heart, my brother in my soul, though troubles wait on every turn, I know I can go. And though the journey is long, the destination is near. The troubles wait at every turn. I know, oh, I can go on. So brothers, take my hand, and sisters, see my soul. When hope awaits at every turn, oh, I know we will go on.
Dear ones, go forth into this week knowing in your heart that we are a people of vision, and that vision matters. Even as our world around us, our culture around us, continuously tries to convince us that we don't have enough stuff, that we should be unhappy with our lives, that somehow we need more in order to feel the slightest bit of contentment. Know that you are supported in living into a better way, one of appreciation for the gifts that we have, be they great or small, and most importantly, the vision of knowing that we as human beings can and should be doing better. That is worth working for and working towards, and we do that together. Go forth in peace, go forth in love. Amen.